So day two of the NFL Combine could help shape the Saints draft board in a big way. Defensive backs, possibly one or two, maybe at nine. More than likely, you're looking at day two, day three. Tight ends, one name at number nine that I really, really like. We're going to talk about that. And also, the Saints have hired their defensive line coach in LSU's, Bo Davis. I'm Tim. Let's talk Saints. So, defensive backs on day two, it's kind of an interesting conversation to have as far as the Saints draft board because some corners, some really good ones, projected in the first round, possibly very early in the first round. Safety, not so much. And when you look at the Saints roster, I think safety's a need, even though nobody's really addressing it. Corner, we're okay, but I think we could get better. But when you look at the situation, the guy is Travis Hunter. And whether you're looking at him as a cornerback or a wide receiver, I don't see any way, shape, or form where he's going to get anywhere near number nine. But if he does, if he's sitting there, look, I would be very happy to roll in the next 4 or 5 years with Hunter and McKinstry handling the outside corner spots for the Saints. Guy's a hell of a player. 21 years old. He's young. Basically, if he's somewhere in the neighborhood of like recently Sauce Gardner, who was just drafted a few years ago for the Jets and is a fantastic corner, he hits anywhere near that. Look, I know there's other needs, and I know there's possibly some other generational players that may be available, but he's one. But like I said, I don't think he gets anywhere near us. But where it gets interesting is the next two guys, Jahdae Barron and Will Johnson. Barron from Texas, Johnson from Michigan. Look, both of these guys have graded out pretty fantastic in their college careers. We kind of know what about Hunter, I think, if anybody follows college football or the draft. But one of the things about Hunter that I liked, uh, you just don't throw on him, right? And in 2025, his opposing quarterback passer rating was 39.9, less than 40. It's outstanding. Barron's was 34.2. He's right there with him. Johnson, 52.6. Now, the thing about Johnson is he only played 6 games in 2024. But in very early on in the draft process, he's was considered top 10. Some very early mocks picked even the Saints taking Will Johnson for sort of the reason why I'm talking about, where they can look at, hey, two young corners, they're going to be good there for years. He's fallen a little bit, and Barron's moved up a little bit, and Barron's defensive back coach at Texas is now the defensive back coach for the Saints and Terry Joseph. If they either one of these two guys check that box, I think if you're the Saints, you seriously have to consider taking a long look at those guys. Going to depend what else is available on the draft board. And when we get to tight ends, we're going to have a serious conversation about that. But depending on how it shakes out, I really think you may have to pull the trigger there. When you get outside of those guys, and this is where the combine is important for. Yeah, I think Hunter could have a bad combine. He's still probably okay. Barron and Johnson to shake out where to solidify being in the first round and where they could be taken. Combine is very important for them. Got to get the measurables and metrics up there from there. But the next group, excuse me, Trey Amos from Ole Miss, Siobhan Revell from East Carolina, Darian Porter from Iowa State. The young man from Florida State, I'm sorry, I have no clue how to pronounce his first name, but his last name is Thomas. And Benjamin Morris from Notre Dame. They all kind of fall into a very similar category in that they're very good in zone coverage. All of them have graded out very well. Some of them, like Porter here, didn't play a lot his first couple of years, didn't grade out real high, but got into a starting role and kind of exploded. So you're compared to like Barron and Hunter, who were really good their whole college career. Some of these guys, I don't want to call them late bloomers. It just, more or less, I guess, maybe had to wait their turn or their opportunity or whatever. But they produced once they finally got there. Amos and Ravel also, PFF throws some pretty good man coverage grades on for those guys. Everybody I just mentioned, all of them play the run fairly well, which is important. So I don't think if the Saints take or if they pass on one of the top guys, if they're available at 9, which I get it too, because there's going to be a couple other good players that are likely to be available there for him. But looking into day 2, maybe even how this kind of works out, maybe some of the guys on the back end of this list, like a Morrison or a Porter or a Thomas, kind of falls into day 3. But with those 2/3 and 2/4, I think if you can get some depth, that's not a bad move either. Corner is not really being talked about a whole lot in the Saints draft boards, but I think it's something they need to keep an eye on, because especially moving from this man philosophy they've had for years, wanting to go to a zone, and a lot of these guys very good in zone. Some of them, the man may be a little shaky, but some of them, the man's like Hunter and Barron, the man is almost as good as the zone coverage. To transition into that 3-4 defense with cover 2, cover 4, and playing a lot of zone behind it, something the Saints, I really do think, have to keep in mind. I think the other thing that the Saints have to keep in mind is, I'm going to preach at Brandon Staley and Terry Joseph, even though I probably shouldn't, because they obviously forgot more about football than I'll probably ever know on the defensive side. But for the love of God, you have a playmaker in Alontae Taylor. Please figure out where you're going to put him. Let him get all his work and reps there. Let him go make plays. Do not do what the previous staff kept doing and moving him around and going, well, we're trying to do what's best for the team. When I think he's clearly shown he's a playmaker, the best thing for the team is to take your playmaker, put him in a position where he make plays, leave him there, let him go make plays. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because if they decide Taylor on the outside opposite McKinstry is the way to go, I get it. Let him go handle it. Let him go make plays. But if they decide they need him back on the inside where he really excelled as a playmaker last year, or possibly moving him to safety, which I could understand that also, because, man, he reminds me an awful lot of CD Deuce. And CD Deuce, we know, was really good on the inside. And after we basically gave him away in a trade to Philly. We watched him play for both Philly and Detroit, back to Philly again as a safety, and he was pretty damn good there too. And we know Taylor played a little safety in college at Tennessee. I think Taylor, what they want to do with the playmaker, and he even sent a tweet out when they started hiring Staley and defensive coaches, please unleash me. And I couldn't agree more. Please unleash him. Find a spot for him. And if a spot is on the outside, then that kind of takes the cornerback conversation down a little bit and maybe brings up the safety conversation a little more. So let's talk about that. And when you're talking about the safeties, it kind of starts. This group is I would say not highly thought of right now in the draft process. And the guy who they think the most of is Malachi Starks. He seems to be the only one they're talking about possible as a first round pick. It's out of Georgia. Very good coverage guy. Really good run defense. Look, guy had basically last year had an 8% missed tackle rate, which is outstanding. Guy just doesn't miss tackles. In his 3 years at Georgia, almost 2,500 snaps at safety. 1,191 of them were at deep safety, 664 in the slot, 544 in the box. This guy can kind of play everywhere. He may be the only first-round safety, but I don't even know if that's for sure. I think combine is going to be really important for him, and I think overall how the league's looking at safeties is going to be important to him. But when you get to the next group, and as far as the Saints go, I at one time he was considered a top 10 pick. It seems like not so much anymore. And considering some of the other names we're going to be talking about when you're talking about the combine, safety at 9, I don't know. But again, I think it's a need for the Saints because we don't really last year didn't really have a true playmaker, didn't truly have a guy, even Honey Badger, age is catching up with him, a guy you can really, really rely on back there to make some plays and to clean some things up. And again, if you're going to a 3-4 scheme, more cover 2, cover 4, cover 6 stuff going on back there, I really think we need to look at upgrading our safeties. And you may be able to do it on day 2. And a long stretch of names pops up here. And Xavier Watts, Sebastian Castro, Kevin Winston Jr. is very interesting. He got hurt last year, but he was a monster in 2023. And just mention him real briefly because since there's not a lot of, he only had 74 snaps last year, not a lot to go on in his 2024 film. In 2023, he was a beast. And I think he's one of the guys sitting right now. Nobody quite knows what to do with. He gets to the combines. Medical is going to be huge for him. Plus, what he does on the field once they work out. Ransom at Ohio State, Amanawari for South Carolina. And we're going to kind of start with him because he's an interesting one. Young guy. Right now they're projecting 6'3", 227, where he's going to come in and possibly running somewhere around a 4.4. He may gain some traction moving up, largely based on he can do a lot of stuff. He can play multiple positions, including in the slot and at possibly linebacker, which may interest the Saints. Very similar to what they were thinking Isaiah Stallbert could be for him. I think kind of fits that category, but the difference being, guy played 3 years at South Carolina, over 2,000 snaps. So played against high-level competition. You can probably figure he knows what he's doing. He improved each year for South Carolina. It's a guy floating around there that he could help himself tremendously in the combine, but if he doesn't, he's a day 2 guy more than likely. And could be sitting on the Saints' radar as one of the guys you bring in to help that safety core. But of that group, when you're talking about snap count similar to Starks, where they had a ton of them because most of these guys played an awful lot all of the last 3 years, where 50% or more of their snaps came deep. And again, cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, you're looking at a lot at both your safeties playing deep, some experience and some guys that can make some plays from back there. Watts from Notre Dame fits that. Kevin Winston, previous first 2 years, kind of fits that. Ransom for Ohio State fits that. Amanawari mostly was a box guy with his time in South Carolina, but again, looking at, I don't know if I want to use the word hybrid, but potentially that's where he could come in at. Forgot one more guy we need to, because his coach was also Terry Joseph, Andrew Makuba, who is another one that kind of floating around, possibly more of a day 3 type guy, seems to be gaining a little traction and moving up. I know he had a very good year this year, played very well coming down the stretch for Texas and into the college playoffs. Mostly a free safety. That's pretty much where they had him as a deep guy. And he also graded out this past year very well again, coverage and playing defense against the run. He could be a dark horse candidate for possible late day 2. We've got 2 third-rounders and 2 fourth-rounders on day 3. Depending on how his combine moves him up or down the list, he could definitely be somebody on the radar, especially since his college position coach was just hired by New Orleans and Terry Joseph. But I think a lot of these guys fit that bill. So while we may not be looking at 9, 40 maybe, if one of these guys really grabs the attention of the Saints scouting department, the defensive guys, and go, look, we need to inject some ability at safety, especially if you're not going to move Taylor into some type of playmaking spot in the middle or giving him a shot at safety and you're leaving him on the outside. I think some of this comes up. Castro's an interesting guy. Had a tremendous 2023, kind of fell off in 2024. And I think he's another one. They're not quite sure what to do with. The combine's really important for him. He was primarily worked in the slot from Iowa, just like Cooper DeJean, rookie last year, pick six Mahomes in the Super Bowl, played a very similar position. And if you remember, DeJean was picked one pick before we grabbed Kool-Aid McKinstry. Speculated that DeJean was on the Saints' radar for a lot of the reasons of, primarily in the slot, but some ability to move around and a playmaker. May have another one in Castro. Again, I think the combine dictates a lot what's going to happen with this group when you're Watts, Castro, Winston. Again, I think the medicals for him are hugely important. But somewhere in that mix, if the Saints have the shot, I think you've got to look hard at this group and try to inject some more playmaking in that safety position. It seems like I'm the only one talking about it, but I'm looking back at what we had last year, and I think it was, we all know what was going on with the run defense and the pass rush and our struggles up there, and that was affecting everybody. But I think the inability for our safeties, I mean, it sucks to put them in this position, but when there's position, they've got to come up and make some plays and try to help bail you out. That's part of their job, and we just did not really in the last 2 years really just didn't have enough of that. Need to try to get it back into this defense. The second position group working in day two at the combine is tight end. To me, this conversation basically starts and ends with one name. And if you've heard me talk about tight ends, I've been on record early that I've got no problem taking Tyler Warren with the 9th pick overall. He could be a unicorn as tight ends go. Brock Bowers definitely was last year, and if he'd have been fallen one more pick, got past the Raiders, and had we taken him instead of Fuaga, I'd have been great with that too. But I think Warren maybe, I don't quite know if he's Brock Bowers, but I feel like if he's somewhere in the neighborhood of 75, 80% of Brock Bowers, you take him at 9. He's a guy that's been talked about going, he has a bad combine. He may not even really hurt his draft stock very much. He's a guy that, man, 916 snap total and just completely balled out for Penn State. And when you saw, he's another one coming down the stretch and in the college playoffs, you watch him play and you go, man, there's just a lot of stuff to like about his game. Gives you a big target, gives you contested catch. He's athletic. He can take snaps at quarterback. He's run the ball. I don't know if he's thrown from the quarterback position, but he's definitely, there was one of their big short yardage guys, kind of a tush push type situation. So he was intricate in their offense, and he shows up at the combine and really does what everybody think he's going to do as far as the strength, speed, agility, explosive drills that they're all looking for in the measurements. I'm perfectly fine. He's there at 9. You don't even think twice about it. Grab him and go. Now I'm going to put this video up somewhere, the link here and on the end card, but during Senior Bowl week in Mobile, the view of outside of Warren and Colston Loveland from Michigan, who's pretty much probably the second guy on everybody's list right now. Outside of that, they weren't real high on the tight end position, and then a bunch of them showed up in Mobile for the senior game, and I know some were in the East-West Shrine game and turned some heads, and suddenly the narrative changed to going, holy crap, tight end's a very deep position in this draft. Now, it may not necessarily be deep in the sense of, hey, there's a ton of Brock Bowers in there. Potentially there's one, maybe two, because I think Loveland kind of sometimes gets talked about that way, but I'm a Warren guy. But what they did mention was if you're an NFL team looking for a specific type of tight end, chances are somewhere in this draft, there's a guy very good at what you're looking for, but can do other stuff. And the narrative seems to be, with one exception that we'll get to in a second, you pretty much know what you're getting with these group of guys. You know if they are very athletic, they're good pass catchers, um, solid all around tight ends that grade out. Maybe not great in any one category, but they don't necessarily suck at any category either. Richie Loveland, Helm's a guy that PFF does not like grading wise. You notice they don't grade him very high, but he is another guy that played very well in the college playoffs. And people are just sold on him as an overall NFL tight end. I don't know where to put him, and I think the combine is probably going to decide what the NFL views him as. Arroyo is an interesting case, and I do talk about him in that Senior Bowl video as the guy that he was just devastated with injuries in his time in college. His senior year in Miami started to put it all together, or his last year in Miami, 2024, started to put it all together and started flipping some heads. He showed up at Mobile in the Senior Bowl fully healthy, and people were like, holy crap, this kid can play at tight end as a pass catcher. And seemed to be able to do it all over the field. He shot up the board, and he could be a very interesting, talking about the Saints having 3 picks on day 2. If he doesn't sneak into the first round, and some people think he might, that may be an option for us to fix the tight end position, because I think everybody universally agrees tight end is definitely a position of need for the Saints. And this is a draft where they can address that. Mason Taylor, I think all along, is another one that PFF didn't love his grades. But in Senior Bowl, they kept talking about him. They go, you know exactly what you're going to get in this guy. He's athletic. He handles the short and intermediate routes very well. Good hands and some contested catchability. But in that offense at LSU, he was never truly a primary target. Still caught a lot of balls for a lot of yards in his 3 years. Because during those 3 years, if you think about the group of wide receivers running around the league right now terrorizing people, they were getting the targets, not him. But one of the things they did mention he gets credit for, he's a good route runner. It's the second, third, fourth option a lot of times. Wide open, could catch the ball, turn it upfield, and get yak. And everybody knows in this day and age in the NFL offense, yards after the catch is a big damn deal. Fannin is the guy that mentioned was unbelievable in Bowling Green in 2024, but nobody knew the level of competition he was playing against, and he was the number one option pretty much in that offense. Nobody really knew what to make of him. They were expecting him to go into Mobile, just locked down, because a lot of people had considered him, and if you notice, PFF still does, the first tight end, the number one overall tight end in 2024 as far as grades. He hurt himself in Mobile by most people's opinion. They're expecting him to show up at the combine and maybe get that high level position back. We'll see. What I think is interesting for the Saints is even if he kind of sits down here at 96, where you're looking at day 4 type pick, if that's where he winds up, or even a late day 2 pick, late in the third, Saints sitting around there, it still may be a guy they take the chance on and hope to develop what they need to develop with him to get him to reach his potential. I don't know if you want to go that route, but the option's definitely there. After you get past him, you still have guys, Ferguson for Oregon, for example. It's another pass catcher that people are turning some heads in that Senior Bowl week going, maybe. Kind of climbed his way up the tight end board. And a guy that we talked about in the video that I'll mention again, Jackson Hawes from Georgia Tech, leads a group that's buried in there. Now, you're probably talking day 3 picks for most of them. But it's Daniel, I think it was Daniel Jeremiah doing Senior Bowl week during practices when they were working on short yardage and red zone, going, there's a guy right there that that is showing he can do the dirty work of a tight end in the NFL, which is everybody knows he may be the best blocker in the draft class. In the Georgia Tech, they didn't ask him to do a whole lot in the passing game. Well, he shows up in Mobile, but in those red zone short yardage, he showed two things that's what they were talking about doing the dirty work. He could run those short routes and he could make contested catches. And that's why it's the dirty work in the NFL that nobody talks about. It's not going to have a lot of huge numbers, but he makes the offense go because he can run block. And when you get in those short yardage red zone positions with a guy like him, he's a guy that everybody goes, I don't know if he's that good of a tight end. He doesn't have a lot of yards, only catches 4 or 5 touchdowns a year, but he does his damage in those situations where defenses go, we can't send any real assets to deal with this guy. So he slips out in the route. He can run a good route and make a contested catch and score. It gives them a problem. But they can't in any way, shape, or form think about doing anything on defense to defend against him. So he will get the hidden yards, the dirty touchdowns, the dirty work, that type of guy. Hawes is the one that everybody really, really talked about. And if the Saints even want to go down that route to be a heavy downhill running team that Moore talked a little bit about in his press conference, you look at a guy like that, he's going to help you do that. But then all of a sudden you get down there, you want to flip a pass to a tight end on an out route in the corner of the end zone that nobody's really throwing a lot of coverage at. You may be able to pick somebody up cheap like that in the 5th round, 6th round. So I think tight end definitely a need. The Saints should be able somewhere in this draft to get a guy, get him in. Look, I know they had high hopes for Hoker, and it didn't really work out, and it still may. But I think you got to add somebody that in this group, like they said, at least one thing they do really, really well, they're going to be able to do in the NFL on the football field on Sundays. You need to grab one and put that in there and go, okay, we know he can do this. We can rely on him to do this. And not, we hope he can do this, which sometimes I felt last year for the Saints in the tight end position overall played pretty well, but not really one guy was the guy. Hoping you can find somebody in this draft that can be the guy. We'll see how it shakes out in the combine, and I think the combine is hugely important for this as a whole group. Like we're saying, either to solidify outside of maybe Warren, solidify where they think they should be, or be able to change their fortunes and move up the list. So I'll put a wrap on this one. Filming this Thursday morning. Going to try to have it posted for Thursday night or first thing Friday morning. We'll see how it goes. One quick note before we finish the rundown. I just on Twitter, and I've already shot all of the cornerback stuff, but Will Johnson, and kind of the number 3 on the board, is not working out at the combine. He's waiting to his pro day. So just to let you know that kind of hot breaking news. The other thing that popped today was Saints fired, and then once again, they go back to college. They've got their defensive line coach. They hired Bo Davis away from LSU, which, look, the name Bo Davis, I didn't even have to really go look him up because he's kind of legendary college defensive line coach, and pretty much everybody universally agrees if he's not the best, he is one of the best in college at 2 things, which is teaching technique and getting guys to figure out the scheme and be productive in it. This past year, his 1 year at LSU, he proved that because he took a defensive line that everybody thought was going to be terrible, and quite honestly, beginning of the season wasn't really that good. Got it up to a higher level play by the end of the year. Still definitely not an elite college defensive line, but a whole lot better. You could see improvement both in technique and working within the scheme, the 2 things he's really, really known for. He works mostly with interior guys, which is also important if you're talking about 4-3, where you need to improve the run with some technique. Brian Brzee comes immediately to mind going, if we could just get his run defense technique better, you really have a really good defensive lineman there. Maybe Bo Davis can unlock that. And working with young guys. So as an LSU fan, it sucks that we lost Bo Davis, but as a Saints fan, I'm like, hey, good. Hey, that should help out a lot, getting him in there to work, especially with that defensive interior, especially potentially moving to a 3-4. See how that works out. The other thing I really wanted to mention real quick, I wanted to do it on the first day, and I kind of forgot on talking about the upcoming combine, is the Saints' propensity of always wanting to trade up and never trading down in the draft. I don't know if their intentions are in either category, to be honest. At 9, if you don't get the generational player, a lot of people have thrown out there trading down, and wouldn't necessarily be against it, other than the recognized fact the Saints never ever do it. But as far as trading up, possible for the right guy, and looking at their draft capital this year, and this is really what I want to talk about the trade up. Historically, when we trade up, we burn draft capital in the next year to trade up in this year. And I would really, really, really hope they don't do it. I want to keep our draft capital for the next couple of years as we're trying to sort all this mess out that we have on the roster and every salary cap and everything else. Last year, we did burn draft capital in the 2023 draft to trade up to take McKinstry, which I think was a good move. 2/3, 2/4, I believe 2/7. You have some multiple stuff down there where you could do something similar if you need to. So if it's in that aspect, especially since this draft got some good guys on the top end at a lot of these positions, and then you're kind of looking for guys you can develop, will likely be in those picks, those end of day 2, day 3 picks, or some guys you're going, well, they're limiting what they can do, but they have a high floor. We just don't think their ceiling's real high. Get up some picks in those areas to move up to get guys. Hey, they have a high floor, and we know that they're likely to have a high ceiling. Then I'm okay with it. But please try to leave the 2026 picks alone right now, Mickey, if you could. So where we're sitting, like I said, hopefully Thursday night, maybe Friday morning, but I can try to get this out as quick as I can. Thanks for joining. First time here. Go ahead, give me a like, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications. Plan is we're going to wrap up for the weekend combine stuff and have that hopefully ready for some point Friday. And then Monday, I am still planning as a post combine wrap up. We'll do a live stream Monday afternoon. So till I see you next time, I'm Tim. Peace out and who dat.